Hey guys, Eddie back with Couch Talk. Welcome back to the show. If it's your first time with us, as always, welcome to the show. Guys, please hit like, please hit subscribe below, turn your notifications on, and I promise I will earn your viewership. I'll do the work, I'll do the research, and I will open up the conversations that hopefully will lead us both to greater enlightenment. Today, I want to drill down on one of the key terms that we've discussed a whole lot of recently, and that term is systemic racism. It's a term that comes up a lot when we discuss topics like critical race theory. It's a term that comes up a lot when people discuss some of the statistics that are involved with police officers and, their propensity to pull certain races over, or their propensity to arrest certain races, or their propensity to prosecute certain races after they've gotten, to the courthouse. And I want to talk about this term because this term is essentially an assault on the system itself. And you can know that by looking at the wording of the term, right? So it's discussing systemic racism, which is an indication that not individuals, but the system itself is racist. And as a consequence, the system itself needs to either be demolished and reformed or, modified in such a complete and systemic way so as to erase any racism that's inherent. Now, let's look at the wording itself. As you note, there are two words in this term, and one of them we've already discussed, and that is racism. And if you guys haven't seen the video on racism, I encourage you to go take a look at it. I'll post a link below, but basically, this word is one of many that have been co-opted and expanded significantly in recent times. And let's remember that the true definition of racism is to believe that a race, skin color, or ethnicity is inherently inferior, subhuman, or less human than another. And again, of course, it's been expanded a lot. It's turned into, slightly less human, or it's turned into any discrimination based on race, or this belief that the race is subhuman, which is turned into any discrimination based on race at all, which is turned into any bias that someone has covertly based on their upbringing, which is turned. So you see how it's gotten larger and larger and larger to the point where now it could possibly actually encompass every human being on Earth. So that's the term that we know. Let's talk about the term that we haven't discussed. Systemic. Now, I've asked a million different people what these two words in conjunction mean, and I want to say this in advance. I've gotten about a million different answers. And part of the trouble is I think that this is maybe not so much a technical term and is actually more like a term that anyone discussing critical race theory would define in their presentation, right? So it's not so much a hard-coded definition as something like somebody would come up to, because in critical race theory is, of course, a graduate level class. They would discuss the use of this term before they discuss the paper. And so I think I should probably do the same. So I'm going to tell you what systemic means to me. Systemic means of or pertaining to the actual regulations, laws, or policies that bind the way that we carry out our society. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to have this meaning in all facets of ways that this term would be used, right? For example, I could conceivably see someone using this term in such a fashion as of or pertaining to any person that is within the system or that helps execute the system. So, for example, if a police officer is one who executes the system or enforces the system, then he would, of course, by extension, be a part of the system. And so if even a single police officer were racist, by extension, that would mean that the system is racist. Now, I don't think that that's a very good version of this definition, because if a single police officer were racist, it would make the entire system corrupt by extension. So that's why I don't feel like that's a very logically consistent version of the definition, although I would suspect that that is probably a much broader and thusly a much more popular use of this term. No, I believe that the system itself are the laws that the police officer would enforce. So, if one were to make the claim that America is systemically racist, to me, I would think that they would need to point me directly to a law that is an implementation of a racist belief. I can think of such laws. They are very rare. For example, I believe our immigration policy is essentially racist. I don't know that it is racist so much as it is ethnicist, but they're pretty closely related, right? So, like, I think it's safe to say that if you hated all Germans, I don't know that a German is a race, right? But a German is an ethnicity. It's close enough, right? Now, the immigration policy specifically has quotas that indicate that only a certain number of people can come over and immigrate each year from each nation. I don't like those quotas. I think those quotas are inherently either preferential or deferential to a race or to the opposing race. Another version of a law, policy, or regulation that I believe is systemically racist is affirmative action. I think that, by definition, any quota in a college campus that specifically mandates preferential treatment by virtue of only their race is essentially a racist implementation. But these are rare and few and far between. For the most part, and especially in the case of affirmative action, most people would argue that that isn't racist simply because it's an attempt to counterbalance a disparity between the races in the past. Now, when I ask people what systemic racism means, usually, again, they only give me examples of results, right? So that what they say is like, oh, you just know that America is systemically racist because if you look at all the numbers of people who have been pulled over in the country, black people get pulled over more than white people. Therefore, the system is racist. I'm like, okay, well, show me the law that says that we should be pulling over black people more than white people. Because if you can find such a law, then I'd be like, yeah, that's really bad. The truth is, we probably don't have a law that says that. What we probably have are racist cops who are doing that. Or perhaps we have cops that have a bias against lower income communities, in which case they may be accidentally pulling over more African Americans simply because they happen to be patrolling the communities that African Americans have a weight of living in. Even though, of course, to be poor doesn't mean to be black, but there is a correlation, right? So there's a complication there, right? So, maybe that's the case. Or maybe it's the case that different cultures have different, habits of driving, and maybe they drive at times that the roads are patrolled more heavily, for example, at night. I don't know. Some of this stuff is far-fetched, but what I'm saying is there are many different facets that could go into how a police officer chooses when they patrol, where they patrol, and who they pull over. Another one might be cultural differences in the type of vehicle that they drive, or socioeconomic differences in the cultures and how that could contribute to the type of vehicle they drive in which case, so there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack. Largely, again, I would think that racism is such a potent and powerful and potentially life-ending threat, life-ending accusation. To call someone racist could literally end their career, and their life even, possibly could make them the target of hatred. I would never want to accuse anything, be it person or system, of being racist unless I were 100% sure. Not 80% sure, not 90% sure, 100%. Just because the damage that it does to pose that accusation, like for example in this case, I think the damage that those who use this term are hoping to deal is to end the entire system. I think they are seeking to end the entire life of the system. Therefore, they wish to call the system itself racist. It's a complicated scenario, really complicated scenario. But I think that in order to prove that the system itself is racist, you would need to point out specific laws that are racist. Not laws that, for example, address socioeconomic strata differently, and as a consequence, address race differently. Because that's not racist. That if anything, that's elitist, right? And I wouldn't argue with anybody who says that we are elitist. I also wouldn't argue with anybody that says that there are racist police officers out there. That goes without saying, and I think that they need to be dealt with. I think any police officer that specifically chooses to pull over any race in greater numbers than any other race, these numbers should be presented to police captains and police lieutenants by Internal Affairs and by the FBI. I think as soon as the stats come out, they should be presenting these stats to the leadership team, and that the leadership team should deal with it. If the cop doesn't get absolutely out and out fired, I think they should at least be coached out of their habits that are leading to this differential, right? That are leading to this disparity. But here's what I've noticed. One thing I've noticed is if there was truly racism throughout the police force, I think that it would present one of three ways. One, either the cops at the baseline, the lowest branch of the pyramid, are racist on average, right? And so on average, that skews the numbers. And if that were the case, I would think that leadership would deal with it, or the FBI or Internal Affairs. You would have somebody from the top who would manage it and then modify behaviors until it's fixed. And maybe the leaders are racist, right? That's option number two. If the leadership is racist, not only would the lower branch not get managed or coached correctly, but they probably would get coached to do the wrong thing and have their statistics either masked or covered up. Now, if their statistics are masked or covered up, I'm not sure how we would even find that it happened. And I think that the fact that the statistics bear out disparities between races that are disproportionate, that indicates that at least a cover-up is probably not happening. Now, there may be some kind of like, you protect me, I protect you thing going on there, and I'm not sure about that. But if that were the case, I would think that would present in the form of whistleblowers. You would have isolated cops that are saying, even maybe not right away, but after they leave the police force, saying, oh yeah, Cap used to tell me to pull over black people all day long or pull over Hispanics all day long. And that whistleblower would probably become a target, but not before bringing the truth to light. And they could do it anonymously. They could do it in a way that would make them safe, right? So that's option number two. So option number one is the lower level is racist and leadership would fix it. Option number two is the leadership is racist and whistleblowers would cause it to be fixed. Option number three is there really isn't a systemic police force problem. Option number three is that it's just a socioeconomic difference, a socioeconomic interface that's causing the differences in races getting interfaced. And I believe that there are other factors at play. Like, I don't think it's just one thing. I think it's probably a combination of that with, various things like perhaps African Americans are receiving underrepresentation in the legal defense sector, so that they are receiving harsher sentences, perhaps. I think there's a lot of things at play, although I've seen conflicting evidence too, so it's really, really complicated. One of the troubles I ran into this, and for anybody who's listening who's done some research on this, I encourage you to post some of these studies, some of these sources below. One of the troubles I ran into was when I was looking over the FBI numbers, and I'll post it below. They have like 5 different races. They have like white, African American, and then they had like Asian Pacific Islander, Polynesian, and then something else. And then over on the side, not a race, they had a different 100% bracket of Hispanic or not Hispanic, which was really odd, because then I wasn't sure whether Hispanics classified as white and Hispanic or black and Hispanic, like which do the Hispanics come out of, right? I didn't know. And I suspect they kind of come out of each of the 5 in different variants, but I'm not sure. So if anybody knows the answer to that question, let me know. But the biggest thing that I run into here is that I just don't think that the system itself is racist. I think individuals in the system are racist. And if that's the case, then we don't need to do away with the system. The system is okay. If there are isolated pockets, like for example, our immigration quotas or our affirmative action quotas that are actually racist, I think we need to fix those policies ASAP, right? But as far as, like, for example, the Constitution that says all men are created equal under the law, as far as, our inalienable rights, which are life, liberty, pursuit of property, the pursuit of happiness, those apply to everyone across the board. And I don't think that is inherently racist. I think America stands for egalitarian treatment across the board, regardless of race, sex, gender, religion, creed, whatever. I think that is a safe bet. I think our system is a good one. I think that individual pockets of people are bad apples. And, it's like John Oliver says, one bad apple makes the rest taste bad. No, I'm kidding. One bad apple does spoil the bunch. So what can happen is you could have a police force, for example, of 50 people, and then just have one police officer or 3 police officers even on that 50-person police force that are just like pulling African Americans over all day long. And yeah, that'll definitely skew the numbers. And those 3 police officers should be behind bars as far as I'm concerned. So that's what we need to do. We need to address it individually. Guys, we need to get back to placing the blame of misdeeds on the individual who commits the misdeed. We need to get back to placing the blame for a horrible ideology such as racism on the person who holds that ideology, not on some kind of nebulous, difficult to determine system. Because I feel like what happens here is not only do you condemn those who are innocent in doing that, like for example in that example I mentioned before, if you've got a 50-person team and 47 of them are really good police officers and 3 of them are terrible, you're condemning 47 police officers when you say things like, let's defund the police, when you say things like the whole system needs to be scrapped. But not only are you doing that, you're kind of giving those 3 police officers a pass. It's like they could be targeted, prosecuted, and put behind bars, but instead what's happening is they're like, whoo, we got a pass. They're going after the system instead of going after us individually. No, I think we definitely need to go after the individual who is to blame. And I think that we need to get back in this country to placing the blame on the individual who causes the problem, on the individual who has the bad ideology, on the individual who is implementing racist policies. And the policy itself isn't racist, but they're implementing it in a racist way. That is what we need to target, not the system. But guys, let me know what you guys think below. Let me know what you believe. Post your comments, and please, like I said, if you guys have any idea how to drill into the studies and the numbers a little bit better, I encourage everyone to post their sources, and all information is good. There's no such thing as a bad, well, there are such things as bad studies, but you get my point. But the more information we have available, the better we can disseminate the information and all grow as a group. I'll catch you guys next time on Couch Talk.